I'm Dave Thomas from Fort Erie, and I'm chair of the local Canadian-Cuban Friendship Association of Niagara. And we very much appreciate Canada's foreign policy regarding Cuba and maintaining relations. What's very disturbing to me is Venezuela and Cuba are close allies. They've helped each other. They've just had an election, and Canada chooses not to recognize the new government, but yet we recognize the new president of Brazil, where Brazil locked up the leading candidate and didn't allow him to run in the campaign. So if you could answer that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I thank you, sir, for your words about the strength of Canada's foreign policy, and I think our perspective on Cuba has always been one of those proof points that Canada does make its own foreign policy determinations, and the American administrations, successive American administrations, were never particularly pleased with Canada's perspective on Cuba, but I think it was a way, among other things, of doing the right thing, but also of highlighting that we do make our own decisions, and we are a country that will make its choices around how we support countries around the world in their path towards better prosperity and better opportunities for people. There's still a lot of work to be done in Cuba. In regards to your question on Venezuela, I would propose to you, sir, that anyone who contends to be a friend of Venezuela, whether it's Cuba or Canada or an individual, anyone who contends that they are a friend to the Venezuelan people should be very clear in standing up and condemning the Maduro government that has been responsible for terrible oppression, for terrible marginalization, for a humanitarian crisis the likes of which South America has not seen in a long time, leading to mass exodus, tremendous a number of refugees fleeing all across South America, all because of an illegitimate dictator named Maduro, who is continuing to not respect their constitution, the rule of law, and the principles of what is true and fair for the future. Sorry, sir, I disagree. The Venezuelan people will probably significantly disagree with you as well, because they are suffering and they need true democracy.
I'd like to ask you, why do you think that legalizing and marketing a dangerous drug like cannabis will help?
Oh, shut! Hey! Yeah, you're in a university crowd. This might be a tough crowd, but guys, we're going to be respectful of opinions and questions asked. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Why legalizing and marketing a dangerous drug like cannabis will help prevent it from getting into the hands of children? Because to me, it sounds like that you're willing to let the health and safety of Canadians take a backseat to being able to make tax money off of dirty and illegal drug money. And to me, that just doesn't sound right.
Okay, no, listen. Thank you for your question. And that actually is an opinion that I've heard, and a legitimate question I've had asked to me directly over the years since I came forward with the commitment to legalize and regulate the sale of marijuana. And fundamentally, my approach on this, and let me be very clear, it's not about a new source of revenue for the government. It may end up happening, but that's not what it's all about. It's a reflection of a failure of public policy. The prohibition we have had on cannabis in Canada over the past many, many decades did not work to protect our kids and to protect our communities. It was well known in just about any high school you would choose to go to over the past decade which kid you could go to get marijuana. There's a lot of folks who were in high school recently. Put up your hand if you felt when you were 15 or so that it was easier to get your hands on a joint than it was to get your hands on a bottle of beer. Okay, that right there, thank you very much, is a failure of public policy. It should not be easier, as you say, to get your hands on a drug like marijuana than it is to get your hands on a bottle of beer. Now, there's actually a lot of interesting studies that show that the death rate from alcohol every year far exceeds that of marijuana, but that's, no. That is also not why we legalized it. We legalized it because the current system was not making it more difficult for young people to buy marijuana. And we figured that if we at least treat it like alcohol, meaning if you want to buy marijuana for your personal consumption, you're going to have to go to an official store and show ID that demonstrates that you are 18 or 19, whatever the age of majority is in your province. That would not prevent 100% of younger people from getting their hands on it, but it would make it slightly more difficult. And indeed, that is what it is doing. Now, we are in challenges of implementation right now because going from zero legal market to having a legal market meant there is needed time to catch up on supplies and consumer demands and what actually is out there. But that is a transition time that is underway. But every single dollar someone spends on legal marijuana is a dollar not going into the pockets of organized crime. Now, I understand, sir, what you were saying about taking the money into the coffers of the government. But before we legalized, about $6 billion every year was going into the pockets of organized crime, of street gangs and gun runners. That is not something we want to continue as a country. That would also represent a failure of public policy. And on top of that, if someone is going to make a choice around using marijuana, would we rather they use something that was certified by Health Canada, or would we want them buying something off the street that nobody knows what went into it or what it could be laced by? For all these reasons, there are choices that you can do around that too, for personal consumption only. This is why we made a choice based on sound public policy decisions that legalizing and controlling this substance was the best way to protect our young people, to protect our communities, and to get the profits out of the pockets of organized crime.
I have a question for you. What is the Canadian government doing to mitigate the Alberta oil sand pollution?
Excellent question. Thank you, Mustafa, for your concern about the environment and for your desire to see us have a cleaner world. That is certainly something that I share, that I think we all share, and it may surprise you, but folks in Alberta share very much as well. The innovation and the investments that have been made over the past years in making the oil sands more efficient, cleaner, have been significant. One of the things that was put forward as one of the elements that was put forward in Alberta's recent climate plan was actually an absolute cap on oil sands emissions, so that we actually can know that we will be able to reach our Paris targets, even as we continue for a while, for the foreseeable future, to develop our oil sands. Now, we will continue to look at developing them in cleaner, more responsible ways. We will also look at ways of transporting them to market in better and more reliable ways. Right now, we've seen an incredible increase in the number of oil by rail cars that have been transported. And we can all know that transporting oil by rail is both more polluting and more dangerous than through modern, safer pipelines. But at the same time, I understand people are concerned about pipelines. And that is why we're making sure that as we move forward on building a pipeline to new markets, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. We're doing it responsibly by working with Indigenous peoples, by allowing for consultations, by trying to do the best environmental science we can. Now, there are plenty of challenges around this that continue, but what we are facing right now is actually a discount of tens of billions of dollars on the price that we get of oil, and that's money that we could be investing in schools, in hospitals, in better technology, and in a cleaner future. So we are working to reduce pollution from the oil sands while we continue to be dependent on oil, but we're looking to create the kinds of solutions we need next.
My English name is Matthew of the Bear Clan. Further back, dear clan, my of Anishinaabe, Cree, Métis, Dene ancestry on Turtle Island. I'm also of German and Swiss heritage. Hello, Prime Minister Trudeau. Chi Miigwech, thank you for being here today and listening to our thoughts and feelings with a clear mind and an open heart. I'm a graduate student at Mohawk College studying advanced security management. Prime Minister Trudeau, you've often mentioned that the most important relationship in Canada is the one with Indigenous peoples. Yet you have allowed forcible removal of Wet'suwet'en First Nation people from their land. In 2018, Canada finally adopted Bill 262 in the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. Would you please explain in relatable, truthful language why you are allowing this to occur in direct contravention of Article 10, where you are forcibly removing an Indigenous people from their land?
Thank you. Thank you for introducing yourself in your language. Thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for your passion in making sure that we are truly on the right reconciliation journey. We are working very hard to build a new path with Indigenous peoples in this country. For centuries, for generations, as a government, we failed to live up to the spirit and intent of the original treaties, which were all about welcoming settlers onto this land and sharing the bounty of Turtle Island, but not relinquishing the stewardship of this land that had been there for millennia. But Canada as a country failed to live up to that partnership. Failed in direct ways with things like residential schools, with legal systems that marginalized and criminalized Indigenous peoples for behaviors that they had done and ways that they had lived for time immemorial. We heard loudly and clearly from Canadians and felt it ourselves in 2015 that it was time to bring about a renewal, time to walk the path of true reconciliation. And we are endeavoring to do just that. But it is not easy. It is very difficult because if you think about it, 100 years ago, when a railroad was laid across this country, nobody checked with the local residents whether this was a good idea or this was something they would support. The government used to have the capacity to just decide when and where and what it wanted to do at any given time. We have now understood that that is wrong. And more than that, that is not the way to continue to build a country and develop our natural resources and share in the bounty of those natural resources. And Canada will, for all our investments and leadership on AI and robotics and the knowledge economy, will always be a country with tremendous natural resources and be lucky because of it. But we need to make sure we are sharing the opportunities, the benefits, and the responsibility for making decisions with the people who've lived on this land for millennia. And that is why, over the past 3 years, we have embarked on two different approaches, two different levels of engaging with Indigenous peoples. One is on the Crown-Indigenous relationship. It is looking at treaties and self-government and empowering and settling long-standing land claims and moving forward to get more and more communities out from under the colonialist relic that is the Indian Act. And that is something that we are on as a path. And on the other side, we are working on delivering in an immediate way on the kinds of opportunities and services that, quite frankly, Indigenous peoples have been not delivered as they should have been, as any other Canadian should have been, for too long. We're talking about boil water advisories ending. We've ended 72 of them and are on track to eliminating all of them on schedule within the next 2 years. We're talking about delivering in new schools and new housing, and not just new schools, but new school boards that will be Indigenous-driven, Indigenous-run, new health centers, deeply informed with traditional Indigenous knowledge, in partnership and directed by the Indigenous communities themselves. And there have been tremendous positive developments over the course of the past 3 years. And you can look around the country and hear stories and see examples of great positive developments. But there are also continued challenges where Canada hasn't done enough yet, where there is still much more work to do. And the situation with the Wet'suwet'en is an unfortunate example of that, where we didn't do well enough. Where even though there were elected chiefs along that particular pipeline who were in support of that pipeline, there were hereditary chiefs that were not. And the job we have to do of listening to everyone and recognizing the input and the legitimacy of a broad range of rights holders, title holders, and voices in questions like this is not something we've perfectly figured out how to do yet. It's something we're learning from every day, and unfortunately the Wet'suwet'en is a situation that we are going to be learning some lessons from, because it was not handled the way it could have been or should have been or would be hopefully 10 years from now if the same issue were to come up. I'm not going to say anything other than there is still going to be turbulence as we figure out how to be fully respectful and thoughtful in our approach to the people who've lived here for millennia. We have much more work to do. The UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is something that we support and endorse and are working to implement fully as a matter of law. In 1982, the Canadian Constitution recognized Indigenous rights in Section 35 of the Constitution. There is no reason that Indigenous peoples should continue to have to go to the courts to demonstrate that they have rights because we put them in the Constitution in 1982. We need to go from a place of denial of rights to recognition of rights. And that is very much what our government is working on. But as you so eloquently pointed out, we still have much work to do. We have many more steps to take on this journey, and I will continue to walk hand in hand with you and with all who so desire, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to build this better future together.